It began with silence, an unnatural, heavy silence that filled the great chambers of the Galactic Council. Thousands of alien voices, each one belonging to a different world and species, had argued for months, and now the final vote had been taken. Humanity was to be banished. The representatives from Earth stood still, their faces calm but their hearts breaking. They had fought for years to prove humanity's worth, to show that humans could be more than warriors, more than the chaos the galaxy saw them as. But the Council had made up its mind. To them, humans were too emotional, too unpredictable, too dangerous. The decision was final. As the Council speaker announced the verdict, the humans were surrounded by armed guards. The message was clear. You are no longer welcome among the stars. Their ambassador looked around one last time at the chamber, a place where they had once dreamed of unity and peace. Now it was filled with cold stares and whispered relief. The vote had been nearly unanimous. Only a few species had stood up for humanity, but their voices were drowned in fear. The humans left quietly, escorted through shining corridors that suddenly felt darker than any night. No one said goodbye. Even those who had once called humanity friend avoided their gaze. When their ships finally left the central system, the wormholes that connected Earth to the rest of the galaxy were closed. Every passage sealed, every communication line cut. The stars went dark. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Some were angry, furious at the injustice. Others were heartbroken, wondering what humanity had done to deserve such punishment. But soon those emotions turned into something else: determination. Earth had always been a world that thrived under pressure. Humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters of its own making. Being cast out by the galaxy was just another trial. A massive one, yes, but not impossible. The governments of Earth gathered under one flag for the first time in history. Old rivalries began to fade. No one wanted to repeat the mistakes that had made the galaxy see them as violent and untrustworthy. The leaders called this new alliance the Terran Union. The first meeting of the Union was not grand or perfect. It took place in an underground base once used for space research. The walls still showed burn marks from old rocket tests. Yet in that small room, the new dream was born. If the galaxy has turned its back on us, one of the scientists said, then we will make our own path. We will rise on our own, and so humanity began to rebuild, not out of fear, but out of pride. For years, there were no visitors from beyond Earth. The skies remained silent, except for human satellites and old stations orbiting in the dark. Yet beneath that silence, something powerful was happening. Science advanced faster than ever before. With all their focus turned inward, humanity began improving everything: energy, medicine, transportation, and communication. The old industries that once polluted Earth were replaced by cleaner, smarter systems. But the biggest change came in how humans saw themselves. Without alien neighbors to compare themselves to, they stopped chasing approval. They began working for the sake of progress itself. Children grew up hearing stories of the stars, not as places they were forbidden to reach, but as promises waiting to be fulfilled. Deep under the surface of the moon, new laboratories were built. Mars became a testing ground for ideas once thought impossible. Asteroids were mined with robotic fleets. The dream of the stars never died. It just went quiet for a while. Not everyone was at peace, of course. Some people felt anger toward the council that had cast them out. There were whispers of revenge, of building weapons that could make the galaxy regret what it had done. But the leaders of the Union were careful. They knew anger could destroy them faster than exile ever could. Instead, they turned that energy into progress. "Let our strength be in creation, not destruction," became a common saying of the new age. The spirit of invention filled every city. Engineers built engines that could bend light. Scientists created AI systems that could think, learn, and even teach. Farmers grew crops in deserts. Ocean cities rose from the waves. Humanity had been forced to look inward, and what it found was astonishing. People began calling it the Quiet Century, a time when humanity seemed silent to the galaxy. But in truth, it was preparing. Still deep down, humans never forgot the humiliation. Every record of the Council's betrayal was kept safe in what became known as the Archive of Exile. It held every speech, every vote, every insult ever spoken against them. Not as a weapon, but as a reminder, so that future generations would understand what had driven them to stand on their own. The archive became a place of reflection. Visitors from across Earth came to see it, walking through long halls filled with holograms of alien worlds, worlds that had once called humans dangerous animals. Many left those halls with tears in their eyes, not out of sadness but out of pride, because they realized something profound. The galaxy had feared humanity's strength, but it had misunderstood its source. It wasn't in weapons or technology, it was in spirit. A century passed. Children who were born after the exile grew up under bright skies filled with Terran-made ships. They no longer spoke of the Council with anger. To them it was a story from the past, like an old myth. Humanity had moved forward quietly and steadily. The new generation wasn't interested in vengeance, they were curious about the universe. They wanted to see what lay beyond the sealed gates, not to conquer it, but to understand it. And so research into new forms of travel began. Traditional wormhole technology, the kind the Council controlled, was beyond their reach. So humanity invented something else, quantum slip drives. These engines didn't rely on existing wormholes. They folded small pockets of space, allowing ships to jump through reality itself. It was slow and risky at first. Many ships were lost in testing. But eventually the first successful jump was made, from Earth orbit to the far edge of the solar system. The experiment proved that isolation was no longer a prison. The galaxy had closed its doors, but humanity had built a new key. In time, explorers were sent out, not beyond the galaxy yet, but to its edges. They charted distant stars, discovered long-abandoned alien probes, and listened to faint radio echoes from civilizations that once ignored them. No one in the galaxy knew that humanity had returned to motion. The Council believed Earth was still silent, primitive, and defeated. They were wrong. In hidden shipyards on the far side of the moon, fleets were being constructed, not for war, but for discovery. Massive vessels that could travel alone for decades, carrying scientists, engineers, and explorers. Humanity didn't want to start another conflict. They wanted to see the universe with their own eyes, on their own terms. But in the hearts of the older generation, the ones who still remembered the shame of exile, a quiet promise remained. If the galaxy ever calls for us again, they will find a very different humanity waiting. Years later, an ancient satellite detected something unexpected, a faint signal, weak and broken, coming from a region near the old wormhole network. It was alien, unmistakably so. For the first time in centuries, the stars were speaking again. The people of Earth gathered to listen. The message was mostly static, but one word was clear: help. That moment marked the end of isolation. For 150 years, humanity had been silent, forgotten, underestimated, and ignored. But now the universe was calling again, and this time humanity would answer, not as outcasts, not as the reckless species the Council once feared, but as something far greater. The age of exile was ending. The age of rising was about to begin. The centuries of silence that followed humanity's exile were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. For those outside Earth, humanity seemed to disappear, swallowed by the vast darkness of space. But on Earth, life had only just begun to transform in ways no alien could have imagined. After the shock of exile faded, humans began to rebuild not just their technology, but their sense of purpose. The Terran Union, formed in the first decades after exile, grew stronger every year. Nations that once fought over small disputes now worked together on the greatest challenges humanity had ever faced. Old rivalries were set aside because survival demanded unity. Every decision, every effort, was now guided by the idea that humans had been cast out, and nothing in the galaxy would give them another chance. The focus shifted inward. Cities that were once chaotic with traffic, pollution, and poverty were redesigned. Skyscrapers rose like glass spires. Clean energy flowed through cities, and machines that once threatened jobs were now tools of creation. Humanity learned to live in harmony with the planet rather than at odds with it. Every success was fueled by determination. Every failure a lesson learned. The most remarkable changes happened in the fields of science and technology. Alien civilizations had left humans behind in warp travel, quantum communication, and interstellar weapons. But humans had learned that looking to others for guidance was no longer necessary. They studied the universe from their own perspective. Ancient theories were re-examined, old assumptions discarded, and new principles discovered. In laboratories deep underground and hidden in the deserts, humans built AI systems capable of thinking and learning in ways that rivaled biological minds. These systems did not simply follow orders. They collaborated, explored ideas, and suggested experiments of their own. Humans and machines became partners, not masters and servants. And when combined with breakthroughs in materials, energy, and propulsion, it became clear that humanity's future would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Mars, once a distant and barren rock, became a symbol of this new age. Colonies were built not just to survive, but to experiment. Cities were designed to be self-sufficient, powered by fusion reactors and protected from radiation by innovative magnetic shields. Humans learned to live in harmony with the harsh realities of another planet, turning what had once been a wasteland into a thriving hub of learning, research, and innovation. Even the moon was transformed. What had once been a military outpost became a city of knowledge. Laboratories, workshops, and simulation centers sprawled across its surface. Humans trained generations of scientists, engineers, and explorers who would one day take humanity beyond its solar system. Every mission, every invention, was a silent declaration. Earth may have been forgotten, but humanity was preparing for a return that no one could stop. Yet, progress was not only technological. Humanity's culture evolved in ways that reflected its new purpose. Art, literature, and philosophy thrived. Writers explored the human condition in a universe that had turned its back on them. Pain, loss, and hope became central themes in music, painting, and storytelling. Education emphasized creativity, problem-solving, and critical thinking, preparing young minds not just to survive, but to lead. Despite all the advancements, humans never forgot the humiliation of the exile. Stories were told in every home and school about the day the Council cast humanity out. They were told not to breed resentment or hatred, but to remember that the galaxy had once underestimated them. These stories became lessons in resilience and strength. Children grew up not afraid of the unknown, but excited by it. They learned that exclusion could be transformed into opportunity, and that being underestimated could be turned into advantage. Time passed, and the generations that had been born after the exile grew into pioneers. They had never seen the Council's chambers, never witnessed the vote, and never felt the weight of alien judgment. Yet they carried the spirit of those who had endured the first exile. They were curious, daring, and ambitious. For them, the galaxy was not closed, it was waiting. Exploration became the central goal of this silent era. Humans began sending automated probes into neighboring star systems, mapping planets, tracking energy sources, and studying the remnants of civilizations long gone. These missions were slow at first, but each success built confidence. Each discovery, no matter how small, reminded humanity that the universe was not a prison, but a playground of endless possibilities. And while the galaxy had assumed humans would fade into obscurity, Earth was quietly building something that would one day shock everyone. Massive fleets of ships were being designed, not for war but for survival and exploration. Ships that could travel for decades without resupply. Ships with AI that could think independently. Ships that could endure the most dangerous reaches of space. All of this was done without drawing attention. The galaxy believed humanity was silent, primitive, and defeated. But in truth, humans were becoming a force unlike any other. They were learning patience, strategy, and foresight. They were preparing for a future where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Economies shifted as well. Resources on Earth were used efficiently, and new energy sources were developed to power the growing cities, colonies, and fleets. Scientists discovered ways to harness energy from the sun in unprecedented ways, reducing the need for fossil fuels and creating a model for sustainable expansion. Trade networks developed between Earth, Mars, and the Moon, creating a mini-galaxy of human industry entirely independent of alien influence. Humans also learned diplomacy in new ways. Without other species to negotiate with, they practiced negotiation, collaboration, and leadership among themselves. Conflicts were resolved through discussion, compromise, and creative problem-solving. Young diplomats were trained in simulation programs that modeled interstellar relations, teaching them patience, empathy, and strategy. By the time humans were ready to return to the galaxy, they would not only have superior technology, but a superior understanding of alliances and influence. And while all this was happening, humans never forgot their ultimate goal: to reclaim their place among the stars. Every probe, every fleet, every breakthrough was a step toward a day when humanity would once again be recognized not as dangerous or reckless, but as strong, wise, and unshakable. Yet it was not just technology and strategy that prepared them. Humans learned to cherish what made them unique: their creativity, empathy, and resilience. These traits, often dismissed by the Council as weakness, became their greatest strengths. It was the human mind that imagined, adapted, and overcame challenges that no alien could anticipate. It was the human spirit that refused to break even in isolation. And so, century after century, humanity grew quietly, unseen, and underestimated. The galaxy moved on, unaware that the species it had discarded was not only surviving, it was evolving into something greater than anyone could imagine. The silent centuries, as this era came to be called, were not silent at all. They were filled with the hum of machines, the chatter of labs, the laughter of children learning to reach for the stars, and the quiet determination of a people who had been told they did not belong. By the end of this era, Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a hub of knowledge, innovation, and culture. Mars and the Moon were thriving colonies, each contributing to the growth of human civilization. Humanity was ready. The galaxy had forgotten them, but that would soon change, because the age of silence was only the beginning. Humanity's rise was still to come, and when it did, no species, council, or empire would ever underestimate them again. And somewhere in the quiet depths of space, probes sent decades earlier continued to scan the galaxy, returning faint signals. The first whispers of alien life, distant and broken, were beginning to reach Earth. Humanity listened not with fear but with curiosity and excitement. The universe was calling again, and this time humanity was ready to answer. The silent centuries had taught patience. They had taught endurance. And they had taught a lesson the galaxy would never forget. Humans may be underestimated, cast aside, and ignored, but they cannot be stopped. The stage was set for the next chapter. The galaxy, unknowingly, was about to witness the beginning of humanity's true ascent. After more than a century of quiet preparation, humanity's moment of first contact with the wider galaxy arrived, not with fanfare or battle, but with an unexpected signal. It came from the edge of known space. A freighter, battered and barely functional, appeared from an old, unstable wormhole. Its hull was scarred from battle, and the crew inside was exhausted, wounded, and desperate. They were fleeing a war that had torn their civilization apart, seeking safety anywhere they could find it. For the first time in generations, humans encountered another species face to face. But instead of fear or suspicion, they offered help. The freighter was in desperate need of repairs, its systems failing, its energy reserves almost gone. Human engineers worked tirelessly, patching the hull, repairing engines, and stabilizing the ship. Medics treated the wounded, not asking for anything in return. This act of kindness was remarkable, not just because the aliens had expected hostility, but because humans themselves had once been doubted as compassionate. The galaxy had long assumed humans were reckless, violent, and short-sighted. But here, in this first act of contact, humans showed something the Council had never anticipated: generosity. Tempered with intelligence and foresight, the aliens, stunned by the gesture, began to see humans in a new light. Whispers spread across the stars. Earth is not as they said. Humanity survives. Humanity is thriving. Word traveled slowly at first. The freighter returned home with tales of humans who rebuilt a dying ship, healed the wounded, and shared technology beyond imagination. Other small species, often oppressed or ignored by the larger empires, began to look toward humanity with hope rather than fear. Back on Earth, leaders of the Terran Union watched these developments closely. They knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had not yet realized that humanity had been quietly building fleets, AI systems, and colonies capable of independent survival. And now it was time to see just how much the galaxy had underestimated them. Exploration fleets were dispatched cautiously at first. Ships equipped with quantum slip drives traveled to neighboring systems, mapping stars, scanning planets, and testing technology in real conditions. Every mission returned with valuable knowledge, expanding humanity's reach and understanding of space. Yet these fleets were also a statement. Humans were not hiding anymore. They were returning to the galaxy on their own terms. In one distant system, a young captain piloted a ship toward a derelict colony. The inhabitants had once been enslaved by a larger empire, now fleeing in small groups. The humans approached slowly, carefully, offering resources, repairs, and medical aid. Word of their arrival spread like wildfire. Those who had once feared the Terran name now spoke of it with respect. It was not conquest that defined this first return. It was the quiet, undeniable strength of humans acting with purpose. They helped where others could not. They healed where others had destroyed. And in doing so, they began to build alliances, not through force but through trust and reliability. The alien species that interacted with humans for the first time were often amazed by their ingenuity. Small settlements were transformed almost overnight as humans shared knowledge of energy generation, agriculture, and medical techniques. The galaxy had assumed humanity was primitive. Now these species saw them as a civilization that had advanced far beyond what anyone expected in such a short period of isolation. Yet, even as humans offered assistance, they remained cautious. The galaxy had once turned its back on them, and that memory ran deep. They offered technology, advice, and guidance, but never allowed themselves to be manipulated. Every decision was calculated. Every alliance measured carefully. They were learning the ways of diplomacy, not as naive newcomers, but as a people who had survived exile and grown stronger because of it. The first freighter encounter became the spark that ignited humanity's return. Soon others followed. Refugees, explorers, and traders began to seek the Terran Union's aid. And each time humans extended a hand, the galaxy began to realize a simple truth. They had misjudged Earthlings. Humans were not reckless, not weak, and not naive. They were patient, resilient, and unyielding. Communication became a key tool in this return. Humans developed advanced translators and universal communication systems that allowed them to interact with dozens of species at once. Diplomats and scientists collaborated across planets, building networks that no one empire had anticipated. Where the Council had expected submission or aggression, they found collaboration and strategy. It was during these first contacts that the real power of humanity began to shine, not in fleets or weapons, but in ideas and ingenuity. Human engineers introduced energy systems that stabilized failing colonies. Medical specialists treated diseases that had plagued alien worlds for generations. AI advisors worked with alien governments to manage resources more efficiently than their traditional methods allowed. And while the galaxy watched in amazement, humans never sought glory. They did not arrive with banners or armies, but with practical solutions and the quiet confidence that comes from centuries of preparation. The aliens who once doubted them were now beginning to rely on them, and that reliance would prove to be a powerful form of influence. At the same time, humans used this period to observe. Every interaction, every alliance, and every response from other species was studied carefully. Humans learned not just the needs of others, but also the weaknesses of the Council and the old galactic powers. They discovered which empires were corrupt, which civilizations were stagnant, and which species could become allies. Every bit of knowledge added to their growing advantage. Despite their caution, humans did not avoid risk. Explorers ventured into uncharted systems, encountering rogue asteroids, black holes, and unknown phenomena. Some missions failed, but each failure was studied meticulously. Humans adapted quickly, learning from mistakes faster than any other civilization. This adaptability became one of their defining traits, a quality that no other species had anticipated. As more alien ships arrived at Terran space, humans established a network of stations and trade hubs. These hubs provided repair, resupply, and communication, creating a web of influence that expanded faster than any military conquest could have. Species that had once scorned Earth now relied on its technology, guidance, and leadership. By the end of this first phase of return, humanity had accomplished something remarkable. They had not conquered the galaxy, nor had they imposed their will. Instead, they had rebuilt their reputation. Where there was doubt, there was now respect. Where there had been fear, there was curiosity. And where the Council had assumed weakness, there was now undeniable strength. And still, humanity remained cautious. They had learned the hard way that the galaxy could be cruel and unforgiving. They knew that the Council's memory of Earth's exile would never fade, and that their return would not go unnoticed. Every decision, Every alliance, every mission was made with precision, ensuring that humanity's next steps would be unstoppable. The first return was more than just a moment of contact. It was a declaration. Humanity had survived exile, grown stronger in isolation, and now, quietly, they were reclaiming their place among the stars. For the first time in generations, humans could look beyond their solar system not with fear, but with purpose. The galaxy had assumed they were gone, weak and defeated. Now the galaxy was beginning to realize that a new power had emerged, patient, intelligent, and unstoppable. And somewhere in the distant reaches of space, the Council observed these developments with unease. They had cast humans out, thinking it would diminish their influence. Instead, they had created a civilization that would return not with anger or desperation, but with strength, wisdom, and determination. The first return was only the beginning. Humanity had opened the door, and soon no species, no empire, and no council would be able to ignore the quiet, steady rise of Earth. From that moment forward, the galaxy would remember one truth. Humans were no longer the species to be dismissed. They had survived exile, grown stronger, and now they were coming back, not as novices but as equals, and eventually as leaders. The age of first contact had begun. As humanity quietly extended its influence across the edges of known space, something unexpected began to happen. The galaxy, which had long assumed that Earth was a forgotten planet, started to notice the return of humans, and fear began to ripple through the established powers. It started subtly. A council fleet noticed a small Terran research ship conducting scans in a system that had been considered off-limits for decades. The crew of the council ship assumed it was a scouting mission, perhaps a rogue human attempt at espionage. But as they observed the Terran vessel, they saw something strange. It was moving with precision, avoiding hazards, and communicating instantly with automated drones scattered across multiple planets. Its efficiency was unlike anything the Council had expected from humans. Word of this single ship spread quickly. Other alien civilizations began reporting encounters with humans, who were no longer struggling survivors, but capable, confident, and organized. Humans were repairing dying colonies, teaching advanced technology, and negotiating with other species in ways that shifted local power balances. The established powers, long comfortable in their dominance, began to feel uneasy. If humans were capable of this in isolated pockets of space, what could they do if fully mobilized? Rumors began circulating across the galaxy. Humans were building fleets, creating AI systems far beyond what others possessed, and establishing independent trade networks. Some speculated they were preparing for war. Others whispered that humans were simply too clever to be trusted. But in truth, humans were not planning war. Their actions were guided by experience, patience, and strategy. They knew that the galaxy could be unpredictable, and they had learned the value of observation and preparation. Every alliance was carefully considered, every technology shared strategically, and every fleet movement deliberate. Humans had learned the hard lessons of exile. Haste and arrogance could be fatal. Despite their caution, humans were beginning to challenge the old order without even trying. Minor empires that had once been oppressed found hope in humanity's approach. Small colonies that had struggled under bureaucratic rule saw new possibilities. Humans offered solutions, infrastructure, and knowledge that allowed these societies to thrive independently. And as they thrived, the galaxy began to whisper a word that no species had said in centuries: fear. The Council, which had once dismissed humanity as reckless and dangerous, began to feel an unfamiliar tension. They could no longer ignore the growing influence of humans. Every minor success, every new alliance, every repaired colony became evidence that humans were not only surviving, but excelling. A high-ranking council advisor voiced the unease aloud. "They are not what we expected," the advisor said, pacing the observation chamber. "We cast them out, thinking they would fade into irrelevance. But they are building something far greater than we imagined. If we do not act, they may become a power we cannot control." Other council members dismissed the warning at first, convinced that humans would remain cautious and isolated. But reports kept coming. Humans were moving in systems the council thought secure, establishing diplomatic ties with species that had been loyal to council rule, and spreading technology that could rival the fleets of entire empires. Panic began to grow, subtle at first, then more overt. The Council ordered fleets to monitor human systems, to record their movements, and to report any signs of aggression. Spies were sent to infiltrate Terran colonies, but most found that humans had anticipated such interference. Security systems were advanced, and observation drones could detect intruders long before they reached populated areas. The Council's fear was fueled not by evidence of hostility, but by potential. Humans had always been underestimated, and this time their quiet efficiency made the galaxy uneasy. No one knew how far humans could go, how fast they could adapt, or what strategies they might use if provoked. Even smaller species, who had benefited from human assistance, began to notice the Council's tension. Reports of Council fleets shadowing human missions reached them, and they realized that humans were no longer just a local problem. They were changing the balance of power across the galaxy. On Earth, leaders of the Terran Union were aware of the rising concern, but they were not worried. They had expected that the galaxy would eventually take notice of their progress. Humans had survived exile, adapted, and thrived. Now they were returning to the wider galaxy not with anger, but with strategy and foresight. The first response was subtle. Humans adjusted trade routes, established communication hubs, and created neutral zones where multiple species could interact safely. These actions were designed not to provoke conflict, but to demonstrate capability. Humans wanted to show the galaxy that they were strong, intelligent, and reliable, but they were also patient. They understood that the fear they were inspiring could be a powerful tool if managed wisely. In one instance, a small Council fleet approached a Terran research station near the edge of a disputed system. The human crew welcomed them cautiously, offering data, medical aid, and updates on local colonies. The Council officers expected arrogance or defiance, but they found calm confidence and careful diplomacy. The humans did not threaten, but their organization, knowledge, and efficiency were undeniable. That encounter sent shockwaves back to the Council. Reports described humans not as primitive or reckless, but as disciplined, capable, and adaptable. Every member of the Council was forced to reconsider their assumptions. Humans had learned from their exile, and now they were demonstrating the consequences of underestimating them. Meanwhile, humans continued to expand their influence quietly. Colonies on Mars and the Moon served as hubs for scientific research, fleet development, and diplomacy. Explorers ventured farther into neighboring systems, mapping resources, discovering alien life, and establishing relationships that would prove invaluable in the years to come. The galaxy's fear was fueled by the realization that humans were not bound by the same constraints as other species. They had no need for approval from the Council, no desire to follow outdated traditions, and no reliance on alien technology. Humans relied on ingenuity, collaboration, and resilience, the very qualities that had allowed them to survive exile. Over time, the fear spread beyond the Council. Major empires began to reassess their alliances, worried that humans might disrupt long-standing agreements. Traders who had once ignored Earth now sought contact, hoping to gain access to Terran technology and expertise. Even species that had been indifferent or hostile to humans began to recognize their potential. And yet, humans acted with restraint. Every mission, every alliance, and every decision was carefully calculated. They did not seek conflict, but they did not shy away from showing their strength. Their presence alone became a statement. Humans had returned, stronger than anyone had imagined, and the galaxy would have to acknowledge them. The fear of humans, while growing, also revealed opportunities. Minor species that had been overlooked by the Council began to see humans as partners, not threats. These species were willing to share knowledge, technology, and resources, creating a network of alliances that further strengthened humanity's position. Humans understood that true power did not come from intimidation alone. It came from competence, trust, and the ability to act when the moment was right. They built relationships that were mutually beneficial, helping others while simultaneously preparing for the day when their influence would extend across the galaxy. In secret, the Terran Union continued to develop advanced fleets, AI systems, and communication networks. Every advance was made with the knowledge that the galaxy was watching. Humans had learned that fear, when managed wisely, could become a tool. but only if it was paired with skill, patience, and foresight. By the end of this period, the galaxy's perception of humanity had shifted dramatically. Once dismissed as reckless and dangerous, humans were now seen as capable, resourceful, and unpredictable. The Council's fear was not of aggression, but of potential, the realization that humans could achieve far more than anyone had anticipated. And in the minds of the humans themselves, the lesson was clear. The galaxy had doubted them once, underestimated them once, and even tried to cast them aside. Now every decision, every action, and every alliance was designed not only to survive but to thrive. Humans had turned fear into a strategy, patience into power, and exile into opportunity. The spark of fear had been ignited across the galaxy, but it was not a fire meant to destroy. It was a warning, a signal that humanity had returned, and that the world they had once known had changed forever. The galaxy had assumed humans would remain in the shadows. Instead, humans had learned the value of restraint, preparation, and precision. And when the time came for them to step fully into the wider universe, the galaxy would realize the true strength of a species that had once been exiled, yet had never stopped rising. The age of fear had begun, not because humans sought to dominate, but because they had shown the galaxy that they were more than anyone had expected. And from that fear, humans would build influence, alliances, and a position of power that no one could ignore. The spark of fear was the beginning of something much greater, the realization that humans had returned, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The galaxy was watching, but humanity had learned patience. After centuries of preparation and decades of careful expansion, the Terran Union was ready for the moment everyone had been anticipating. Not a moment of vengeance, but a moment of reckoning. It began subtly. Fleets that had long been preparing in secret began to move with precision. Advanced sensors scanned distant systems. Quantum slip drives perfected over decades allowed ships to reach distant stars in ways no other species had imagined. And yet there was no rush, no reckless aggression. Every action was deliberate, a statement of strength rather than an invitation to conflict. The Council, still uneasy after witnessing humanity's first return, tried to contain the influence spreading from Earth. They issued orders to their fleets to observe and limit human expansion. They sent envoys to alien species under the guise of diplomacy, warning them to avoid alliances with humans. But it was already too late. Humanity's reputation had grown beyond the Council's control. Every alliance humans formed was strategic, but also compassionate. Minor species, long oppressed or ignored by larger empires, found security in human guidance. Humans offered advanced energy systems, medical technology, and agricultural support. They repaired failing colonies and stabilized economies that the Council had long neglected. And in doing so, they gained loyalty and respect, not through force, but through action. The first open challenge came when a cluster of systems previously under Council influence began reaching out to humans for aid. Starships were requested to escort transport vessels, repair planetary infrastructure, and provide training for local populations. The Council's fleets attempted to intervene, claiming authority over the region. But humans responded not with violence but with superior strategy. They anticipated the Council's maneuvers, positioned their fleets efficiently, and coordinated communication across multiple systems faster than anyone expected. The result was a stunning demonstration of human ingenuity and preparation. The Council forces found themselves blocked, unable to take decisive action without risking conflict across multiple systems. Humans had learned to turn potential confrontation into leverage, using precision and strategy rather than sheer firepower. Meanwhile, Earth itself had become a hub of innovation. The Moon and Mars were no longer isolated colonies but critical centers of production, research, and fleet coordination. Massive shipyards produced vessels capable of independent operation for decades. AI systems managed resources, logistics, and communication, ensuring that every mission ran smoothly. Humans had transformed isolation into a self-sufficient, powerful network. Even as humans expanded, they continued to offer assistance rather than domination. They rebuilt colonies devastated by conflict, shared medical knowledge that cured previously untreatable diseases, and taught other species to harness energy sources more efficiently. Each act of support strengthened human influence and made clear that their power was not meant for conquest, but for leadership built on trust and capability. The Council, however, began to realize that these actions, while peaceful, had consequences. Systems and species that once followed council orders without question were now looking to humanity for guidance. Minor empires that had previously been ignored began aligning with the Terran Union, attracted by competence, fairness, and reliability. The Council's authority, once taken for granted, was starting to erode. The Terran Union's leadership knew that the time had come for a more visible demonstration of strength. Not to attack or subjugate, but to show the galaxy the true capabilities of humanity. They decided to reveal the Forge, a massive facility hidden on the moon for decades, capable of producing fleets of advanced ships with AI-assisted command. The technology within the Forge represented centuries of human ingenuity, and its existence alone would change the balance of power in the galaxy. When the Council's observers finally detected the Forge, shock and disbelief swept through their ranks. No one had expected humans to develop such advanced production capabilities. Entire fleets could be built in weeks, outfitted with the latest technology, and deployed independently. The Council had believed that humans were limited by isolation, but in reality, they had been quietly preparing a force that was unmatched in efficiency and adaptability. The revelation caused panic. The Council's authority, already challenged by human influence, now faced a tangible demonstration of human strength. Minor species that had once feared Council power saw the Terran Union as a new center of stability and protection. Humans were no longer just a rising power. They were a force the galaxy could not ignore. Yet humanity did not act recklessly. Every fleet movement, every demonstration of capability was measured. Humans sought to establish dominance not through fear, but through respect and competence. Their fleets patrolled systems only to protect trade routes and maintain order. Their scientists offered knowledge to prevent disasters. Their diplomats built alliances based on mutual benefit rather than coercion. This approach created an interesting dynamic. The Council, once feared, was now forced into a defensive position. Their warnings and threats held little weight against humans who had proven patience, intelligence, and foresight. Humans had transformed fear into strategy. They had shown the galaxy that their power was not a threat to peace, but a guarantee of stability, if it was respected. The most striking moment of this period came when a Council fleet attempted to blockade a system aligned with the Terran Union. Humans did not engage immediately. Instead, they coordinated with the local species, reinforcing defenses and sharing intelligence. When the Council fleet approached, humans deployed a combination of advanced navigation, AI coordination, and fleet tactics that neutralized the threat without direct conflict. The result was clear. Humans could dominate the galaxy systems without ever firing a shot in anger. Word of these actions spread quickly. Species across multiple systems began to realign, seeking alliances with the Terran Union rather than the Council. Humans had not only proven their strength, but had done so in a way that inspired loyalty, respect, and admiration. Their reputation as capable, ethical, and strategic leaders grew with every encounter. Throughout this time, humans also continued to advance their technology. Research stations on Mars, the Moon, and in orbit around Earth developed new propulsion systems, energy sources, and AI innovations. These advancements were shared selectively with allied species, creating a network of collaboration that further strengthened humanity's position. Every discovery was carefully integrated into the Terran Union's plans, ensuring that humans remained several steps ahead of any potential competitor. The Council, realizing that traditional tactics would no longer work, began attempting diplomacy and negotiation. Envoys were sent to Earth, offering recognition and trade agreements. But humans had learned the value of leverage. They listened carefully, responded strategically, and made it clear that the galaxy could no longer dictate terms to them. Humanity had risen from exile not by asking for permission, but by proving capability. This period of quiet dominance, skillfully executed, marked the true reckoning. The galaxy had believed humans were weak, isolated, and inconsequential. Instead, humans had transformed centuries of exile into preparation, patience, and power. They had built fleets, colonies, alliances, and technology that rivaled the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. And they had done it without provoking unnecessary conflict or making enemies unnecessarily. By the end of this period, the galaxy had a new understanding. Humans were no longer the species to be dismissed. They were intelligent, resourceful, and patient. They had survived isolation, mastered strategy, and turned fear into influence. The Terran Union had become the central hub of stability, innovation, and leadership. The Council, which had once exiled humanity with ease, now faced a force that could not be ignored. The minor species that had once been overlooked had found in humans a protector and partner. Trade networks, technology sharing, and diplomatic alliances had shifted the balance of power. The Terran Union was not only prepared for the future, it was actively shaping it. And yet humanity's rise was not fueled by arrogance or revenge. Every action, every fleet deployment, every alliance was guided by patience, ethics, and strategic foresight. Humans had learned the lessons of exile. Power without discipline leads to destruction. Control without trust breeds rebellion. Influence without foresight invites disaster. The reckoning, then, was complete. The galaxy now knew the truth. Humans were not a species to be underestimated. They were disciplined, intelligent, and capable of unmatched resilience. Exile had forged them into something greater than anyone, including the Council, had imagined. As the Terran Union continued to expand its influence, Earth and its colonies remained the heart of this quiet empire. The Moon, Mars, and orbital stations were not only centers of production and research, but symbols of humanity's ability to transform adversity into opportunity. Every mission, every innovation, and every alliance was a reminder of how far humans had come since being cast out. The galaxy, once confident in its control over humanity, had learned a hard lesson. Underestimation of humans was no longer an option. They had risen from isolation to become a superpower that combined intelligence, ethics, and strategy, and the galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humans were no longer the species to be dismissed. Centuries of preparation, decades of quiet expansion, and decades of careful diplomacy had led to a moment that would change everything. This was the beginning of the Terran era. It started with influence, not war. Humans did not arrive with fleets meant for destruction or planets meant to dominate. Instead, they arrived with solutions. Systems that had struggled under neglect or conflict found in the Terran Union a source of stability. They provided energy, food, medicine, and infrastructure. They offered guidance in governance and resource management. And in every act of help, humans built trust and respect. Alien civilizations, once indifferent or hostile, began to see humanity as indispensable. Where other species had failed, humans succeeded not through brute force but through ingenuity, collaboration, and foresight. The galaxy was no longer a place of fear for humans, it was a canvas, waiting for their influence. The Terran fleets became symbols of progress, not war. Ships equipped with advanced propulsion and AI could traverse vast distances quickly, providing aid, maintaining order, and supporting colonies. They were not invincible, but they were capable, reliable, and prepared for any challenge. Every fleet movement was carefully calculated, ensuring that humans maintained control without provoking unnecessary conflict. Diplomacy reached new heights. The Terran Union formed alliances with dozens of species, including some that had previously been marginalized or oppressed. Humans shared knowledge, technology, and strategy, empowering other civilizations to thrive independently while creating a network of loyalty and mutual benefit. The galaxy began to understand a truth long ignored. Human strength was not only in their technology or fleets, but in their ability to think, adapt, and inspire cooperation. Even the Council, once the most powerful governing body in the galaxy, had to acknowledge humanity's rise. Attempts to reassert control over systems or influence populations failed. Humans had anticipated these moves and countered them with strategy, communication, and alliances. The Council found that the very species they had exiled could not only match their power, but also surpass it in subtlety, intelligence, and vision. Trade and technology spread like never before. Planets that had struggled with energy shortages now had clean, reliable power. Agriculture flourished on worlds once thought uninhabitable. Medical breakthroughs cured diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries. Humans offered not just survival but progress, and in doing so they made themselves indispensable. Humans had also learned the importance of culture and identity. While the galaxy assumed they would become conquerors, humans instead became leaders by example. They celebrated creativity, encouraged learning, and honored individual achievement. They built museums, academies, and research centers, that showcased human ingenuity while welcoming alien collaboration. The Terran era was not just a political or military transformation, it was a cultural renaissance that spread across the stars. Communication played a key role in this new era. Humans established networks that connected distant systems, enabling collaboration on unprecedented scales. Scientists, engineers, and diplomats from dozens of species worked together under human guidance. Knowledge flowed freely, but humans ensured it was used responsibly, fostering innovation while preventing chaos. The galaxy began to see humans not as reckless or unpredictable, but as reliable and visionary. Yet, humanity never forgot the lessons of exile. Power without wisdom is dangerous, and arrogance can destroy even the strongest civilizations. Humans approach leadership with humility and caution, building alliances rather than enforcing domination. Their rise was steady, deliberate, and calculated, ensuring that the Terran era would be lasting. By now, the galaxy had fully realized that humans were not just survivors, they were architects of a new order. Systems that once depended on the Council now looked to Earth for guidance. Trade, technology, and diplomacy were centered around human hubs. Minor species found security and alignment with the Terran Union, while major powers had to reconsider their strategies. The balance of the galaxy had shifted irrevocably. The rise of humans was not without resistance. Some species, threatened by the Terran influence, attempted sabotage, misinformation campaigns, or isolated attacks. But humans had anticipated these challenges. Advanced sensors, strategic AI, and well-trained fleets allowed them to respond effectively without unnecessary destruction. Even opposition became an opportunity for negotiation and collaboration. Humans had learned that power exercised with intelligence and ethics created lasting influence. While force alone led to conflict and resentment, education and knowledge became central to the Terran era. Human academies on Earth, Mars, and the Moon trained not only humans but also aliens, spreading advanced knowledge in science, engineering, medicine, and governance. This approach fostered loyalty and dependence, but also respect. The galaxy began to recognize that humans were not trying to dominate. They were offering a path to advancement that others could follow willingly. The Terran Union also established diplomatic councils across key systems, giving voice to multiple species and creating a shared framework for decision-making. Humans led by example but did not force compliance. This approach earned admiration from countless civilizations that had suffered under oppressive empires. Humanity had transformed influence into leadership and fear into respect. Strategically, humans had positioned themselves across critical systems and trade routes. Advanced slip drive technology allowed fleets and resources to move quickly, ensuring control without occupation. The galaxy learned that humans could project power efficiently, respond to crises instantly, and maintain stability without resorting to aggression. These qualities made the Terran era different from any previous age in galactic history. The Council, once feared and dominant, now faced a new reality. Their old authority had eroded, their fleets were challenged by human efficiency, and their influence was waning. They could no longer dictate terms or rely on intimidation. Humans had not only survived exile, they had transformed it into a foundation for leadership. The Terran era spread across the galaxy, not through conquest, but through capability. Humans repaired planets, stabilized governments, and created networks that encouraged cooperation. Minor species flourished under human guidance, and even major powers had to engage with humans respectfully. The galaxy was learning a profound lesson. Strength combined with wisdom, patience, and foresight is more powerful than domination alone. By now, humans were seen as the central force in galactic affairs. The reputation built over centuries of exile, preparation, and careful expansion had culminated in an era of unparalleled influence. The Terran era was not simply about human power, it was about humanity reshaping the galaxy in a way that reflected their values: intelligence, collaboration, ethics, and adaptability. Technology continued to advance at an unprecedented pace. New propulsion systems allowed near-instant travel between colonies. Medical innovations eradicated diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries. Energy systems stabilized entire planets, and AI assisted in management, logistics, and governance, allowing humans to lead efficiently without imposing force. Yet the greatest strength of humanity remained its adaptability. Unlike empires that relied on static systems or rigid hierarchies, humans could respond to crises, anticipate challenges, and innovate solutions faster than any other species. This ability, honed through centuries of exile and preparation, became the defining feature of the Terran era. By the end of this period, the galaxy had undergone a transformation. The species that had once dismissed humans now relied on them. Systems that had struggled under neglect now thrived under Terran guidance. Trade, diplomacy, and alliances were centered on human hubs. The Terran era had begun not with war, but with preparation, patience, and leadership built on respect. The legacy of exile, centuries of preparation, and careful expansion culminated in an undeniable truth. Humans had risen from isolation to become a superpower, not through aggression but through ingenuity, ethics, and determination. The galaxy had learned what the Council had once ignored. Humans could not be underestimated, dismissed, or ignored. The Terran era was just beginning. Humans had proven that they could survive exile, adapt to any challenge, and lead a galaxy that had once rejected them. They had turned patience into power, strategy into influence, and resilience into leadership. And as humans continued to expand, innovate, and guide, one thing became clear to every civilization. The Terran era was not only a new chapter in galactic history, it was a turning point that would define the future for generations to come. Humanity had returned from exile, risen from isolation, and claimed a place in the galaxy not through fear or force, but through capability, ethics, and vision. The age of the Terran era had dawned, and the stars themselves seemed to recognize that the galaxy had changed forever. The story of exile was no longer one of shame or defeat. It was a story of resilience, strategy, and ultimate triumph. Humanity had risen, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.